But did you know that what Slimer can and cannot do has been very carefully thought about? Do you remember how he first appeared in the original Ghostbusters movie?
Disgusting blob. I'm gonna have to hold him myself.
Ray and the other Ghostbusters eventually captured Slimer. But by the end of the film, the ugly spud had escaped again. The Ghostbusters, and of course Slimer, were the creation of this man here, Dan Aykroyd, who plays Ray Stantz in the films. And when we went to Hollywood to find out all about the Ghostbusters, of course the first thing we did was to talk to Dan Aykroyd about his interest in ghosts.
The real mysteries are when you go home at night and you feel a cold presence in a room in an old house, and you turn and you think you see something or you hear something. Now that's the kind of mystery that I like to investigate. But I don't think that there will be a mass belief in this kind of thing unless a flying saucer lands at Dodger Stadium during a game. Then maybe people will start to say, hey, there's more than just this planet. I've had light experiences. I've seen lights that shouldn't have been there in an old house, and I have had a vivid premonitive dream experience when my grandfather died. I was in New York City, and I wasn't even in my apartment. No one could reach me. The family couldn't reach me. I went to sleep that night, and I had a dream that he was waving goodbye to me, and I woke up the next morning, got a telegram he was dead. Now, this is not unusual.
Well, Dan has a great psychic history in his family. He's talked about it in the past. There have been psychics in his family, and he subscribes to the Journal of the American Psychical Society. And he's always been a believer, and I have never been a believer. And what I liked about his original premise was that his characters were skeptics. There was no attempt to explain anything in a spiritual sense. All the explanations were technical. And so the characters of the Ghostbusters approached the supernatural much like janitors or exterminators. And I love that, shoving the mundane right up against the supernatural and getting that edge.
I think I just kind of embellished on sensibilities that every human has about psychic energy. Some are non-believers and skeptics, and we need them. And some believe. I happen to believe.
Dan had three characters who were pretty much undifferentiated. They sounded like they could have been interchangeable. Maybe he read subtleties into their characters, but it wasn't apparent on the page. But knowing now who was going to play the roles, knowing that Bill would be one character and Dan another and me the third, made it a little easier. And we pretty quickly evolved different areas for each character. We decided that my character would be the brains of the Ghostbusters, Dan would be the heart, and Bill would be the mouth.
The film was partially shot on location in New York and then completed here at the Burbank Studios in California. The producer, Joe Medchuk, was delighted and amazed with the impact the film had.
We had faith in it. We thought it was going to be very popular. I'm not sure we ever at that point understood that we were going to create something that would have some sort of lasting effect on the culture. It's been about 6 years now, and Ghostbusters are part of the culture. I mean, they aren't as big as Santa Claus, but they're pretty close.
Very soon work began on the cartoon series The Real Ghostbusters for television.
The characters are not meant to look, certainly not meant to look exactly like the actors. They're meant to look like the characters, which means they have some resemblance in terms of very, very basic things of the actors. If a character wore glasses, he'll wear glasses in the cartoon show. But we've changed the color of their hair, for example. Peter Venkman doesn't look like Bill Murray. People probably think Egon Spengler looks the most like the actor, but that's partly because he's got those glasses which are characteristic. We've given him a much different haircut than Harold had in the movie, for example.
Early on, when we knew there was going to be a TV series, we were shown character sketches. And I was probably most shocked of all because my character came out blonde.
I'm definitely the fat one, I know that. I think I think the essence of Ray is there. The voice is not mine, and I kind of don't look like that character. I think the one that's closest is probably the guy that plays Harold. But I think they've captured all the essence of the characters. You know, Harold, the serious kind of, you know, empirical mind, and Winston, who's kind of the eyes of every man who views the Ghostbusters from outside and from inside. Kind of, you know, he came to us from the outside, was not a Ghostbuster, and was brought in, and kind of his reactions are, you know, what every man feels. And Billy, the Venkman character, is kind of the cynic and kind of, you know, the lazy one, and Ray is the enthusiastic kind of up chirpy squirrel type, you know. Slimer was in the very, very first draft. He was, we called him Mr. the Onion Head, or, yeah, the Onion Head. And basically, he always had those traits. He always was kind of, sort of like a remnant of somebody who liked to enjoy life. I often kind of think maybe it's Belushi in a way coming back, in a sense, you know, because, you know, John sort of had that kind of lust for life feeling and appetites for things, and Slimer always had that trait of swallowing things and having them drain right through, and, you know, it's weird that he's got his own show. That is really strange to me, you know. The Onion Head now is like a cartoon star, which is really, really weird, because there's no way when I wrote that first scene of him haunting a guest house in upstate New York, you know, and drinking the milk out of the fridge and scaring the guests, that I ever would thought there'd be any more than that. In fact, that was his only appearance, you know.
Burbank Lot is just across Hollywood Way from the animation studios of DIC, or DEEK as they call it, where the series is designed and scripted. Len Jansen and Chuck Menville are the story editors. Where do you start, Chuck?
The story can begin from a writer outside who comes in with an idea that's a good idea, or sometimes we come up with ideas and we give a writer the idea and say, can you take this and elaborate on it and make it work? Then the story has to be fleshed out into what's called an outline, which can be 15, 16 pages, and all the story points are in that outline, even some lines of dialogue to indicate at different points what's going to happen. Then that has to be approved by everyone involved too. And from that point, then we go to a script.
I think the idea is one of the hardest things to come up with, especially where the series has been on for 4 years. And I can't tell you how many premises we go through to get down to the 13 or whatever it is that we need for the season. Maybe 100 or more. Once we get a script in, we'll each read through it, just a quick read. And then we'll moan and groan a lot, and depending on the...
And this is even with our own scripts.
Yeah. Story editing is not thrilling to watch, and it's not thrilling to do.
It's gripping.
Yeah.
you got to get some footage of us story editing.
That's really... Put you right on the edge of your seat. It's incredible.
So, Adriana, you got some stuff?
Yeah.
Once the script has been finalised, it's handed over to this man, animation director Will Mineo.
What I do is I take all the different elements of the show, and I'm the one responsible for assembling them into a filmable package. For instance, when we get the script, the first thing we do is I get together with my art director, Pat Wong, and Pat will break down the script into lists of what props, what backgrounds, what character designs we need. And we'll discuss it and we'll decide what we really need to get done to get the storyboards rolling. Because normally we have to have the storyboards started about the same time as the model package. And so we try to get the major characters for the episode done, the major locations, so the storyboard guys will all be conforming to the same models on them. When we hand out the script to the board artists, they have a 2-week overall deadline, and then they have a 1-week deadline to bring in pencils. And when they bring in pencils, the storyboard is at about this degree of finish, just where you have a rough composition, and you can see who the characters are, what they're doing, that sort of thing. And then we check it against the script, make sure everything's playing properly, that the gags are set up well enough that you can read them, that the characters stay in the right positions for what's going on. And normally I just have those roughs for about half a day, and I check them, and if there's anything I want changed, I'll stick a little post-it on it and go, well, like, this shot would be better as a close-up, for instance. And then I give them back to the board artist. We have a little discussion about the show, how it's going overall, and then they come back in a week with something which hopefully is wonderful. We have storyboard cleanup artists who help me do changes on the storyboards. We have character designers who are designing characters for future episodes. And we have people who are designing background keys, which are line art black and white drawings of what the locations will look like, and we have our color key artists that take all the black and white art and convert it to color.
Dozens of talented artists prepare the storyboards, backgrounds, and character designs.
Line 1, take 2.
Meanwhile, the dialogue for each real Ghostbusters episode is recorded in a nearby sound studio.
If we can trap and contain the Ghostmaster, the force field will vanish.
That's a big if, Egon. According to Who's Who in the spirit world, the Ghostmaster rates as a class 11.
11?
Right. Even if we could use our traps and throwers, we could never hold him.
Hey, Egon! Hide! Oh, hide! The Ghostmaster's coming!
You find that most of the guys who do voices in the cartoons can do many impressions of people and sounds and all that, but other cartoon characters I do
Baby Kermit on the Muppet Babies.
And Skeeter, don't forget Skeeter. Now, she's a little girl, and he never mentions her because he's a male chauvinist frog.
Yeah, I guess I am a male chauvinist frog.
It should just be keep turning the lights off, no on.
Yeah, and he should be tired when he comes down the steps, so he should be.
Uh-oh, I'm late. Oh, this clock is broken. I gotta get away and get this thing, and I gotta go this thing. Huh? Oh, rat. Yeah.
I spend most of my time doing voiceovers. It's fun, it's fast, and it's furious. And another great thing that voice people really enjoy is that when you're an on-camera actor, usually you get stuck with doing one role or whatever your physiognomy restricts you to. But here, like on Ghostbusters, I mean, you can come in and you can be a little dog, and you can be like one of these guys. Or you can even be a person with 12 voices. Hello, how are you? I have 12 voices. Now, on camera, you can't quite get away with that, So this is, for an actor, it's a tremendous thing to be able to play bad guys, good guys, and all in the same show.
Fascinating. I'd love to be doing it myself. Back to the story. Once the dialogue has been recorded, edited and timed, the sound tapes, storyboards, backgrounds and character designs are sent out to animation studios in Japan. At the start of each filming session, the director, Will Mineo, flies from Los Angeles to Tokyo to discuss the style and the organisation of the series with the Japanese team responsible for making and shooting the animation cells.
In terms of production facilities, the Japanese, I think, are the best in the world in terms of doing special effects. And in an odd way, over the last few years, they've wound up being closer to doing European and American-style character animation than the other available subcontracting countries. In the case of KKC&D, the studio that we're using this season, they were the studio that did the first 2 seasons of the Ghostbusters TV show, and they did the syndication episodes of Ghostbusters. And so they're the most experienced studio in the world in handling these characters, and so there's no reason not to go back to them. They've already succeeded with them. A lot of what happens between the Japanese director and me is that we've had to establish a working relationship, because a lot of what happens in the program is based on our mutual trust and respect in each other's abilities. Because for him to do his job, I have to allow him a certain amount of leeway. For instance, when he's going over the show, if he sees something just doesn't work in the context of actually filming it, and he'd be much more aware of the minutiae of the show than I am, then I need to have somebody I can trust enough to give the freedom to make those changes with very little discussion.
Maybe the biggest problem is the difference of hours between Tokyo and Los Angeles.
ですからこちらが仕事始まるときはもうロサンゼルスの仕事が終わる時間だ。
What we mean is that when here it is in the morning we start working, it's already in the evening in Los Angeles, and it's time that people go home. Most of the producer or director in animation business don't speak English.
もちろん向こうの方も日本語は話せません。
And of course that the American people, there are not many people who speak Japanese, or almost not at all.
ですから一つのシリーズ、例えばゴーストバスターズに今年例えば今関わり合うとしたらやっぱし200人から300人ぐらいやっぱし関わり合うんじゃないですかと日本ですと。
So that for a show like Ghostbusters, we assume that for one episode there will be 200 to 300 people involved in the work that is done by KKCND, which means from layout to answer print.
After we ship the shows from Los Angeles, what happens in a studio like this is the storyboard scenes and our direction are finessed, where the action is more refined. The exposure sheets, where the action is broken down into frame-by-frame actions. And what's going on around us is these gentlemen are bearing the brunt of the production process, where they're the ones that are actually making the characters' arms move, their mouths move, or in the case of one poor unfortunate guy here, taking the Ecto-1 car and having it come into a stop and do a bounce, which is incredibly complicated because of the amount of line work on the vehicles. After we move on from here, we'll go and see the trace and paint department, where they take the line art that these gentlemen have done, and it's shot on clear acetate, which we call a cell. And the people there take those cells and they paint on the back of them with cartoon color, which is a type of acrylic paint. And that's where the characters begin to take form and have the real colors as you see them in TV. And after that process, then we'll probably have a look at the camera bed, where we'll see a cameraman and a director as actually shoot the cells and the background art. The average episode of Ghostbusters has between 11 and 13,000 cells. It sort of is a median of 12,000 cells of artwork to do it. And in addition to the cells, there are about 400 background drawings. We're just hoping that all of their efforts and our efforts will result in a good film that will be worthy of the Ghostbusters tradition.
I think the thing that made me feel best was we sort of got the stamp of approval from psychologists and educators in America who felt that Ghostbusters was a good thing for kids to play. They found that, and this was certified and documented in a major article in the Chicago Tribune, that teachers said that they liked the kids playing Ghostbusters because it was non-competitive. There were no good guys and bad guys. It wasn't like a war game. It wasn't cowboys against Indians or Americans against Russians. It was people together against the unknown, battling the unknown. Also, for little children, it seems to have it gives them confidence. Right at the age when they're most afraid of the supernatural, which apparently is from 5 to 7, along comes the cartoon show, and kids identifying with the Ghostbusters, feeling they can actually defend themselves against the supernatural. So I guess a lot of kids wrap themselves in their Ghostbuster toys and costumes at night and go to sleep and sleep well.
And do they dream about Slimer? What are the things that Slimer will and will not do? Chuck?
He will never hurt anybody. Even his enemies, I don't think he'll ever really hurt them. He can cause them to fall into an ash can, or the door slams and they're locked in or something, but am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the worst thing he ever does is slime people, and that's for the most part by accident or out of his exuberance.
So, now we know. Always exuberant is Dan Aykroyd, and he's got a suggestion for you.
If you want to be a Ghostbuster at home, it's very easy. You just have to check the research and just ask your grandfather, your uncle, your aunt, your mother, your dad, big brother, about some of the local legends, and you'll find that you may have a ghost closer to you than you might think.
Something strange in the neighborhood.